Hey everybody, I'm Chef Tom with atbbq.com, and this is Biscuits and Gravy. That's right, today we're making biscuits and gravy, and we're doing it all from scratch. We're gonna do the biscuits from scratch, we're gonna make the sausage from scratch, and of course we're gonna make the gravy from scratch. But before we jump into the recipe, I just wanna say thank you so much to those of you that have been shopping over at atbbq.com. Every purchase you make there helps support the show and helps keep it going. If you haven't checked it out yet, atbbq.com, there's all kinds of fantastic products that will improve your outdoor cooking experience. We're gonna start by making sausage, and the first thing we need to do is get our grinder set up. We're using the Anchor Shroom mixer, which has a sausage grinding attachment that works really great. So these elements are all very cold. They just came out of the freezer to make sure that our meat stays as cold as possible so we don't melt any of the fat as we're grinding it. As you can see, we're using kind of a medium-sized die. We're gonna put the meat through here twice, so it'll have not a super fine or not a super coarse texture in the end. So just flip it on its side, stays nice and stable. We're ready to grind. Now we get a lot of questions about what to do with your leftover scraps when you're trimming ribs or you're trimming your pork butts. That's what we're gonna be doing today, is making sausage with those leftover bits. So we've got some rib tips that I've taken all the cartilage out of. So we've just got that straight up spare rib meat, very good meat. It could use a little bit extra fat, so we're also going to be incorporating about 20% straight pork fat off of the pork butt with the 80% rib tip meat. So we'll start off by feeding our rib tip meat in. And this meat is partially frozen. It was completely frozen. I've defrosted it enough to kind of pull the pieces apart, but you want to keep it really cold when you're grinding so you can keep from melting that fat. So that's 2 pounds of rib tip meat there, and then we're gonna feed in some pork fat at about a ½ pound here of fat cap from pork butt. And now that this has worked its way all the way through, we'll kind of mix it around to get it evenly distributed, and we're gonna add our seasonings before we do our second grind. We're gonna add a couple tablespoons of fresh sage that's been minced down. Also a couple tablespoons of coarse ground black pepper. We've got a couple tablespoons of the whiskey barrel smoked salt from Noble Salt Works. And we're gonna add a little bit of heat with some Cattleman's Grill 8-second ride. A little bit of sweet with some brown sugar. And last we have some nutmeg. We'll go for about a 1/4 teaspoon of the nutmeg. We're quickly going to mix this around just to kind of coat the meat and the spices. Remember, we're trying to keep it cold, so we don't want to handle it too much. And then we can run it back through the grinder one more time. So now this is coming out at our desired consistency. It's got a little bit of chunkiness to it, but it's fine enough that it's not going to be unpleasant when you bite into the sausage. All right, I'm gonna throw this back into the fridge so we can continue to keep it cold. So next we're going to set up our bowl with our paddle attachment. And what we wanna do is create a primary bind for our sausage. Now the primary bind is what happens when you start to agitate this meat, and it's what makes sausage have that sausage texture. It really creates the difference between a sausage texture and just a ground pork or a ground beef texture. And because of that, it's an important part of the sausage making process. Now it doesn't take long. This will probably just be about a minute or so, but what we're looking for is for this meat to become tacky. It should start to stick together. So when you pick up a clump of it, it's gonna hold on to the meat below it rather than just all crumble apart. All right, so I'm gonna pick up a handful and show you what I'm talking about. So that's what I mean. See how it's all holding together and it's got this sort of tacky texture on the surface? That's what we're looking for. Now, if you were going to stuff this into links or form patties out of it, this would be the time when you would do that. But what we're doing today is keeping it in a bulk state. So just all the way it is, because we're gonna be cooking it in that pan and making the gravy out of it. So I'm just gonna throw this into the fridge while we make our biscuits. Now for our buttermilk biscuits, we're gonna start with 2 cups of self-rising flour, 1 teaspoon of white sugar. We'll give that a stir. Then I'm gonna add to that 1 stick of unsalted butter that I've grated and put in the freezer so it's super cold. Just on a box grater, the larger side of a box grater. We'll toss that in the dry mixture to coat. I'm gonna break some of these down a little bit. It's a very simple biscuit recipe, just 4 ingredients to bring the biscuit together. We're gonna create a well right there in the center. And into that well, we're gonna pour 1 cup of buttermilk. And just start to incorporate that. Now this should be pretty shaggy. It's not gonna come together into one piece necessarily in the bowl. What we're gonna do is once it starts to clump together like this, we're gonna turn this out onto a floured work surface. So like I said, this really shouldn't be a piece of dough yet. It should be a bunch of pieces that are gonna come together. And we're gonna do that by quickly working them and pressing them together. Kind of a bit of simple kneading here. Good idea to keep some flour on your hands so it doesn't stick. What we're gonna do here is just kind of roll this out into a square. You can use a bench knife to kind of square up the edges. It's a really great tool to have around. So you can also cut with it. So we're gonna cut this into quarters here and then stack these quarters on top of one another. And what we're doing is we're creating more layers. So we'll press that out once again. I'm gonna roll this out into a rectangle that should be about 1 inch thick. And this will give us 6 biscuits, 6 square biscuits. Now I'm just gonna trim off the very edges here, because if you get a nice clean cut, that can help you get a little extra lift. Also, it's gonna make our biscuits look a little cleaner. And then we'll divide this into 6 biscuits. You see how we've created these layers. We've got a nice clean cut down the side of the biscuit. Now all of that working together should help us to get some nice rise out of these. So we'll transfer these to parchment lined sheet pan. And then we're gonna move them back to the fridge for about 20 minutes to make sure they're nice and cold when they go on the grill. All right, we've given those biscuits some time to chill out. We're gonna now brush some butter on the top of them and hit them with just a little bit of seasoning. So we'll hit the top with just a little bit of butter, add some of that buttery goodness. And it's gonna help our seasoning stick to the top as well. I'm gonna hit these with a little bit of Cattleman's Grill tri-tip seasoning. So you can see we've got some salt in there. There's little bits of dried red peppers, It's gonna be a nice savory touch, which works great since we're doing biscuits and gravy. And I also really like that it adds some extra color. It just looks a little bit more interesting on top. Now, if I was doing something sweet with these, say if I'm gonna serve them with jam or maybe just some honey, I probably would leave the tri-tip off. I mean, it works great for when you're doing biscuits, but if you were doing something with a sweet application, maybe a sprinkle of sugar, even a little bit of smoked salt. But for what we're doing today, the steak rub's perfect. Now we're baking our biscuits today on the Yoder Smoker's YS640 pellet grill. It's running at 450 degrees. Slide those right here on the top shelf, close it up, and we'll give it about 20 minutes before we check on them. All right, we've got those biscuits on the grill, so while they're cooking, we're gonna prepare our sausage gravy. We're gonna start by putting our sausage in here and getting it browned. We're gonna use half of the sausage that we made, so this is 1 pound 4 ounces, or 1 1/4 pounds. So that batch of sausage that we made earlier, that'll do a double batch of gravy. So I just like to let this sit for a little while and get that bottom side nice and crusty. That's what we're going for. Kind of flip it over and chop it up. We're over sort of a medium, it's medium-ish heat, maybe a little bit above. So we're getting some nice color, but we're also rendering some of that fat out of there. All right, this sausage is looking really good, browned all the way through. We've got some nice color. On the bottom, we've got some nice fat and fond to work with for the gravy itself. So I'm gonna remove the sausage from the skillet now, but we'll leave that fat behind. Just smells fantastic. And we're gonna turn that heat down now so we don't burn all that fond. And we're gonna add a little bit more fat. We've got a half stick of butter here. Start to sort of scrape up some of that fond, move it around. Lots of flavor in there. All right, so we've got that fond kind of scraped up, our butter's melted. We're gonna add to the 1/4 cup of butter, a 1/3 cup of all-purpose flour. And start stirring that around to make our roux. Now this you just want to keep moving so that you don't scorch anything. We're down just a little below medium heat now. And what we're looking to do is just kind of cook the rawness out of that flour. All right, so the roux has darkened just slightly. It's kind of putting off this nutty aroma. And that's how I know that we've kind of cooked the rawness out of the flour. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start adding our milk. So this is just whole milk. We've got 1 quart or 4 cups of it that we're gonna add to the skillet. And I'm going slow at first to make sure that we don't have any clumps. Once we kind of get past that point, we can go a little bit quicker and start to crank the temperature up just a little bit above, maybe like a medium high. We'll bring this to a simmer and it'll start to thicken. All right, so it's taking about 5 minutes, but it's thickening up pretty nicely now. Turn the temperature down just a little bit. We're gonna add our sausage back at this point. We wanna make sure that that's plenty warm when we serve. So we'll give this probably another, well, at least 5 minutes just to kind of all warm up, continue to thicken a little bit. Of course, you can adjust the thickness as you like. It's a little bit runny for what I like right now, so we'll let it continue to cook down for just a little bit longer. While we wait for this to warm up, thicken up, to get that sausage warm back up, I'm gonna add just a little bit of seasoning as well. Now, the seasoning that we have on the sausage is fantastic, but we did just add 4 cups of milk to the skillet, so we could use a little extra. This is just a This is the Oak Ridge Barbecue Spogos, so that's salt, pepper, onion, garlic, and other spices. So just a great like general seasoning salt. So that's looking pretty. That's right where I want it. I'm gonna see how it tastes. That's good stuff. Our biscuits have been on for about 20 to 25 minutes now. They're just starting to brown around the edges. They've puffed up nicely, so they're just about where we want to finish. Come take a look. So you can see those layers of separation on this biscuit and how they're just starting to brown around the edges. They're fully cooked, but we don't want to overcook them and dry them out, so we're gonna pull them off now. All right, let's bring it all together. Smother those biscuits with all that gravy goodness. Just gonna top it all off with a couple of fried eggs here. Let's dig in. That's comfort food at its finest. Just spicy sausage, creamy gravy, tender biscuit. Fantastic. Only thing it could use a little bit of is maybe some hot sauce. But thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to head over to atbbq.com for all of the products featured in today's video. If you enjoyed that recipe, hit the subscribe button. And if you have any questions or comments, or there's anything you'd like to see me cook, let me know in the comment section down below, and let's be good to one another. For more recipes, tips, and techniques, head over to atbbq.com/thesauce. All things barbecue, where barbecue legends are made.